Hey, what's up, all you beautiful people? Welcome back to the podcast. This is going to be a short one today, but I think it's going to be a powerful one, hopefully a very impactful one, because I'm going to share three frameworks that I stole from Nike to build two eight-figure businesses, or at least that was the name of the LinkedIn post, and this thing went pretty viral. So I think people got a lot of value out of it, and I think sharing some of my thoughts here, hopefully we can unpack it a little bit further and go even deeper into three concepts, three frameworks that I've used to build multiple businesses now that I think you won't hear a lot about in other places. So let's dive in. Number one, the initiative. This is one of my favorite frameworks. So in chess, there's a few different ways that you can determine who's winning. Like if you look at the board, you say, who's winning right now? Well, it depends on how you calculate it. And the most common way that people calculate who's winning a chess game is just to count the pieces. Say who's got the bigger, better army, right? Usually, the bigger, better army is winning. So if I have two rooks and a queen, and you just have two rooks, you don't have your queen anymore. Like chances are good that I'm probably winning that game. But it's not always the case because there's another way to judge who's winning a game of chess, and because we know from past historical examples that sometimes a smaller army occupying better terrain can hold off a far superior force. So just think about like the Spartans, the 300 Spartans who held off the Persian Empire at the Battle of Thermopylae, where they just held out for 3 days. Eventually, they lost, but they were able to hold on for a long time because they had what's called the positional advantage. They had the high ground. If you watch Star Wars, Anakin didn't understand that Obi-Wan had the high ground, and he lost his legs and became Darth Vader as a result. So it's super important to understand this idea of positional advantage. It's not always about how big the army is; it's about where that army is. So that's the second way. A third way, and this is what I find to be perhaps the most influential way, it's the hardest way to notice. I would say that 98% of people, and that's a completely made up statistic, 98% of people are completely unaware of this way of measuring who's winning a chess game or any game in at all. And it's called the initiative. So the initiative is just simply determined by which player is dictating the action, which player is acting and which one is reacting. And if you can answer that question, you can usually, with a high degree of certainty, determine who's ultimately going to arise victorious. Now, a perfect classic example of this is Napoleon. This is a guy who would often, dictate where, when, and how the action was going to unfold. And as a result, often, despite having vastly inferior forces, he would manage to win again and again and again. And in business and in life, like I find that a lack of skill or experience can almost always be overcome with the appropriate amount of gusto. So if you're moving forward with momentum, inertia, and energy towards your goals, that is often far more valuable than how many resources you have or where those resources are positioned in the geography. So initiative, who's dictating the action, who is forcing the issue. I find that to be the the way that most people do not think about business. They think about like who's the entrenched incumbents, who has the best go to market strategy, the best product. They're not thinking about who's actually out there calling the shots, who is dictating the rate of play. All right, the second framework that we stole from Nike is more MacGyver, less Batman. So let me back up real quickly. There's this documentary, I think it's on Netflix, maybe on Amazon Prime, called Air. It's all about Nike in the 70s or the 80s. I actually haven't seen it, but there is a document that came out of that called like the 10 Rules of Nike. And I found that document a while back, and this is before I ever became aware that there was a documentary or a movie. I'm not even sure what it is exactly. I found that document, and it had a very impactful. It was very impactful on me and where I was on my entrepreneurial journey, and took some of these concepts and like made them my own. And so, if you guys are interested in that document, you just go Google Nike rules. It'll pop up. But one of the rules in there that confuses people is rule number 6. It's called live off the land. And it confuses people because it's not entirely clear, like, what exactly does that mean, live off the land? But here's how I interpret it. You don't need more resources, you need more resourcefulness. And I find it really empowering just to know that at this given moment in time, like where you are, you probably have everything you need to be wildly successful if you could just take those variables and plug them in the right order. Like you probably already have what you need, you're just not using your resources correctly. Now, when we were building escape climbing, we discovered that there was really two ways to solve a problem. You could solve it by throwing money at it, or you could solve it by throwing ingenuity at it. And when I thought about like this dichotomy of solving a problem either through money or through ingenuity, the classic characters that came to mind was Batman or MacGyver. You could solve a problem by being Batman and spending billions of dollars on your fancy gadgets, or you could be MacGyver and just rely on bubble gum, a half drink can of soda, and like some dreams, and you can come up with a viable solution. And I'm not saying that like spending money on problems isn't the right way to solve the problem. Sometimes it is, but I find it leads to lazy thinking in a culture that becomes dependent on the resources rather than a scrappy culture that is built around the idea of being resourceful and trying to do more with less. And so we had this concept that we always talked about. Is this the MacGyver solution or is this the Batman solution? And we always tried to, as much as we could, hire and promote MacGyvers, people who just found a way to get more done with less without always having to throw money at the problem. And as a result, we were able to build a far more effective company than our competitors did, despite far less capital deployed. And so I encourage you, regardless of what kind of business you have or what area of your life you're looking at, to think, how can I be more resourceful rather than just relying more on resources? And the way that you do that is think more like MacGyver, not like Batman. All right, the third framework that's really served me well in my entrepreneurial journey, at least, is and in my personal life, to be completely frank, is that simple systems are always better than beautiful systems. Often I create these beautiful complex systems with my fancy softwares, my nifty dashboards, and I think, of course, this is going to increase my productivity by 10,000% because look at it, look how pretty it is, look how cool it is. Well, the truth is, complexity often obscures actual effectiveness. Those really complex dashboards and like the interlocking pieces and the software over here that talks to this thing over there, and I have to do all this stuff and manage it here and move it there. It makes you feel productive, but really you're just busy. And I find that these elegant systems, they're typically over engineered and under applied. And so for me, recurring theme of my life is that the best systems tend to be the simplest and sometimes the ugliest. Like a notebook with to-do lists written down can be far more effective than this beautiful Asana or Notion dashboard. I use these softwares and tools, but I try to be cognizant of when I'm just using the tool as a proxy for making me feel productive, like the using of the tool feels productive rather than is it actually leading to an increased output or quality of work. And in a lot of cases, we spend more time on building the pretty system because that feels good, feels productive, but it doesn't actually move us towards closer towards our goal, which is to get more of the right things done. So the takeaway here, best systems tend to be the simplest and sometimes also the ugliest. It's not about how the system looks, it's about what it produces. Okay, it's not about how the system looks, it's about how it produces. So don't get so tied up and locked into like having the coolest or best softwares or it has to look a certain professional way. It doesn't. It just needs to be effective. So those are three frameworks that we've used over the years to build two eight-figure companies. Simple systems are always better than beautiful systems. More MacGyver, less Batman, and the initiative. So I hope this brought you a little bit of value. I hope actually that these are three frameworks or three ways of thinking about your business that maybe you've never thought about before and have given you a new lens to approach this game of business, which is I think this the best game in the world. So it's like to be playing it alongside you guys. As always, I appreciate you being here, taking some time out of your day to join me. I can't wait to see you back here tomorrow. But until then, stay hyper focused, my friend.